Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel, Sola Stories. I am 65 years old, and I went to the city to live with my son for my retirement. Every night, at 3 in the morning, he would take a shower. One time, my curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked. The scene in the bathroom terrified me so much that I moved into a retirement community the very next day. In the small town where I had lived my entire life, the late autumn wind carried the dry chill of early winter, piercing sharply into every corner of the house. My name is Eleanor, and at 65 years old, I had just officially said goodbye to the chalk dust of the high school lecture hall where I had taught for decades. This old craftsman-style house had witnessed almost my entire life, from an enthusiastic young teacher to a widow, and now to this old woman whose hair was streaked with the frost of time. On the mantelpiece, a photograph of my late husband still stood, solemn and imposing. Thinking of him stirred a complex feeling in my heart, a mixture of sorrow and a sense of a heavy burden lifted. People often say to speak no ill of the dead, but the invisible scars left on my soul by his beatings and harsh rebukes could never fade. He was a tyrannical, violent man who always treated our son and me as his private property. The day he found out he had terminal cancer was the same day our son, Julian, received his acceptance letter to a great state university. I suppressed all my grievances and resentment to care for him until he closed his eyes for the last time, not out of love, but out of duty, and to allow Julian to focus on his studies. The day my husband died, I didn't shed a single tear. I only felt the weight on my shoulders suddenly lighten. From that day on, my son and I had only each other. I poured all my love and energy into raising him, taking on odd jobs in addition to teaching to support his education. From a young age, Julian was bright and decisive, but also had a quick temper, perhaps a trait inherited from his father. Whenever I saw him frown and shout, an invisible fear would creep into my heart. I tried to use all of a mother's tenderness to correct and guide him, hoping to smooth out the sharp edges of his personality. In the end, Julian did not disappoint me. He graduated with honors and quickly found a good job in a major city, eventually getting promoted to regional manager for a well-known corporation. He married a wife, a gentle and kind girl named Clara. At last, the heavy burden on my shoulders was lifted. I thought that from then on, I would live a comfortable, carefree life, tending to my tomato plants in the morning and taking walks with the other older ladies in town in the evening. But life rarely goes as planned. That day, I was busy in my garden when the phone rang. It was Julian. "Hey, Mom, what are you doing?" His voice on the phone, even in a simple greeting, always carried a subtle sense of pressure. I wiped my dirt-stained hands on my apron and chuckled softly. "I'm just checking on the tomatoes. They're almost ready to be picked." "Is something wrong, son?" "Mom, Clara, and I have talked it over. I want you to get your things in order. This weekend, I'm driving down to pick you up and bring you to the city to live with us." I froze. The thought of leaving this place, of leaving the quiet life I knew so well, made my heart sink. "Oh, let's not, son. I'm used to living here. I don't know anyone there. I wouldn't be comfortable, and I'd just be a bother to you and your wife. You two have your jobs. You're so busy." "What bother, Mom?" Julian's tone held a hint of impatience. "It's a son's duty to take care of his mother. Besides, what if something happened to you out there all alone in the country? Who would even know?" "I've already made up my mind, so please don't argue. We've already prepared a room for you." His "I've already made up my mind" way of speaking sent a chill down my spine. It was exactly like my late husband, but I still tried to refuse gently. "Julian, honey, I know you care about me, but I'm really too old to change. I won't have any friends there, no garden. I'll be bored to death." "What do you mean, no friends? You'll come with us. Clara can take you out, take you shopping." "Here, I'll let you talk to Clara." There was a moment of silence on the line, and then a clear, gentle voice came on, like a fresh spring flowing through the tense atmosphere. "Mom? It's Clara." "Oh, hello, dear." I softened my tone. "Mom, please come and live with us. The condo is spacious, and it will be so much livelier with you here. Julian is always worried about your health. He can't rest easy with you living all by yourself. You can come here. I'll take care of you. We can chat. It will be so nice, Mom." Clara's voice had a peculiar persuasiveness. Her warmth and kindness made it impossible to refuse. I knew this girl had a good heart, but I could still sense the compliance in her words. The decision had been Julian's, and she could only obey. I sighed, silent for a long moment. My mind was a battlefield. On one side was the freedom and peace I craved after so many storms. On the other was duty, my love for my son, and the fear that if I refused, Julian would fly into a rage. I was terrified of his anger. I had lived in a hell of anger before, and I did not want to face it again. All right then, I finally surrendered. Let me pack for a few days. Oh, wonderful! My husband will be there this weekend to pick you up. Clara's voice was filled with joy. After we hung up, I stood silently in my vegetable garden. Over the next few days, I began to pack. I didn't have much, a few old clothes, a faded photo album, and a couple of my favorite books. As I flipped through the pages of the album, looking at photos of Julian's bright smile as a child, my heart softened again. Maybe I was overthinking things. After all, he was my son, the boy I had raised with my own 2 hands. He was bringing me to live with him out of a sense of duty because he was worried about me. I should be happy. I packed up my past, half a lifetime of memories, and prepared for a new journey. I said goodbye to my neighbors, the old friends with whom I shared morning and evening chats. Everyone was happy for me, saying how lucky I was that my son was taking me to the city to be cared for in my old age. I just smiled, an incomplete smile. That weekend, Julian pulled up in a gleaming black luxury sedan. Seeing my son dressed in a tailored suit, looking every bit the successful man, a wave of indescribable pride washed over me. He bustled about, helping me with my things, constantly asking if I was comfortable. Clara had come with him, and the warm family atmosphere temporarily swept away my worries. "Mom, look, I bought you a few things." Julian opened the trunk, revealing several boxes of expensive vitamins and supplements. "Oh, you shouldn't have. Spending all this money. I don't need anything." I chided him lovingly. "I don't lack money, Mom, just time to take care of you. I can only work with peace of mind if you're living with us," he said, his tone sincere. The car started, leaving the small town, the old roof, and the familiar garden behind. On the wide highway, skyscrapers gradually rose before us like giants. The noisy, bustling atmosphere of the city left me feeling a little overwhelmed. Julian and Clara's condo was on the 18th floor of a high-end residential building. It was much larger than I had imagined, with gleaming hardwood floors and luxurious furniture that spoke of expense and opulence. Julian led me to a small but well-equipped room with a window overlooking a lush green park. "This is your room. I've had a TV and air conditioning installed for you. If you need anything, just tell Clara. Don't be a stranger." "It's wonderful, son. Thank you both so much." Clara skillfully helped me put my clothes into the closet. This girl was always like that, constantly busy, always with a gentle smile on her face. But I noticed that whenever Julian was near, her smile seemed a bit strained, and a flicker of caution and timidity would cross her eyes. The first dinner was held in a seemingly warm atmosphere. The meal was lavish, filled with all my favorite dishes. "Mom, eat more, you're too thin," Julian said, placing a large piece of fish in my bowl. "I can get it myself. You eat." "Clara, aren't you going to get Mom some more soup? What are you just sitting there for?" He turned to his wife. His voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with authority. Clara flinched and quickly ladled some soup for me. I saw her hand tremble slightly. I pretended not to notice and smiled at her. "Thank you, dear. The soup is delicious." Throughout the meal, it was mostly Julian who did the talking. He talked about work, about big projects, about the pressures of competition. He spoke of his achievements without any modesty, full of self-satisfaction. Clara and I just sat and listened, nodding occasionally. I suddenly realized my son was no longer the little boy who needed my protection. He had become a man of the world, a man with power, and he had brought that power home with him. That night, lying in the unfamiliar, soft bed, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The sounds of the city drifted in through the window, the distant blare of car horns, the faint murmur of people talking. Everything was new, and everything made me uneasy. I tried to soothe myself. "Everything will be fine. I just need time to adjust. During the first few days in my son's luxurious condo, I thought my worries had been for nothing. The new life wasn't as oppressive as I had imagined. On the contrary, it was filled with what seemed like sincere care. In the mornings, after Julian left for work, Clara would often accompany me to the farmer's market. She wouldn't let me carry a thing, always asking, "Mom, what do you feel like eating? I'll make it for you." She listened patiently to my scattered stories about my teaching career and my old students. Occasionally, she would take me to a large shopping mall and buy me a few new outfits, despite my repeated refusals. "Mom, that looks so elegant on you," she would praise, her smile gentle, her eyes clear. "Julian would be so happy to see you in it." Julian also played the part of a devoted son. Every evening when he returned from work, no matter how tired he was, he would first stop by my room to greet me. "Mom, how are you feeling today? Do you need me to buy you more supplements?" He bought me an electronic blood pressure monitor, instructing me carefully. "Mom, you need to measure it twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. Have Clara write it down in this notebook so I can check it." But this piece, it turned out, was just a thin veneer. It happened on a night at the end of the month, about 2 weeks after I had moved in. By then, the city had fallen asleep, with only the dim glow of streetlights filtering through the window frame. I was a light sleeper anyway, often tossing and turning until the middle of the night. When the clock on the wall struck 3 dry chimes, I was suddenly jolted awake by a sound that was familiar, yet occurring at a most unusual time. A rush of water. It was the sound of a shower, coming from the main bathroom, the one right next to my bedroom. The fierce, rushing water broke the profound silence of the night. Who would be taking a shower at 3 in the morning? I strained my ears, but there were no other sounds, only that rhythmic, lonely rush of water. Could Julian or Clara be sick and need to sponge off? A sliver of worry entered my heart. I wanted to open my door to check, but I was afraid of disturbing them. The sound of the water lasted for about 15 minutes, then stopped abruptly. The condo fell silent again. I couldn't get back to sleep that night. The next morning at breakfast, I tried to act as natural as possible. "Julian," I said, looking at my son, "were you not feeling well last night?" Around 3 in the morning, I heard someone taking a shower. Julian was reading the paper, his eyes never leaving the print. "Oh, it's nothing, Mom," he replied nonchalantly. "This new project has been really stressful. I've been feeling antsy and restless. I just got up to take a quick shower to cool off so I could get back to sleep." His explanation sounded reasonable, but just then, I saw Clara, who was bringing a bowl of oatmeal from the kitchen, freeze for a split second. The chopsticks in her hand almost slipped. She quickly regained her composure, placed the oatmeal on the table, and smiled, explaining for her husband. "Yes, Mom. He's been working so hard lately. He's been tossing and turning all night. Please don't worry." My daughter-in-law's fleeting moment of panic did not escape my notice. As a teacher with decades of experience, I was always sensitive to unusual expressions. Something was not right. But I didn't press the matter, just quietly finished my breakfast. I had thought it was a one-time thing, but I was wrong. 2 nights later, again at precisely 3 in the morning, the sound returned. It was the same sound of a faucet being wrenched open, followed by the rushing, rhythmic flow of water. This time, I felt an inexplicable chill. Taking a shower in the middle of the night due to stress was believable once, but for it to be repeated at the exact same time was no longer a coincidence. The following nights were spent waiting for that sound. As 3 in the morning approached, my heart would pound. Sometimes the water would turn on, and other times it would be terrifyingly silent. This unpredictable anomaly became a form of mental torture for me. My sleep became fragmented, and I was always in a state of half-slumber, my ears pricked for any sound. I began to pay closer attention to my son and daughter-in-law. During the day, Julian went to work as usual, acting normally, but I could occasionally see traces of exhaustion and irritability in his eyes. He was quicker to anger over small things. I tried to gently probe my daughter-in-law. "Clara, is something wrong? You haven't been looking well lately. Has Julian done anything to you?" She jumped, startled, and quickly waved her hands, avoiding my gaze. "No, nothing, Mom." I'm probably just not sleeping well. Julian is very good to me. Her words and her expression were in complete contradiction. I knew she was hiding something. A vague fear began to form in my mind, a fear connected to Julian and to those 3 in the morning showers. I couldn't bear it any longer and decided I had to have a frank talk with my son again. I chose a time after Clara had put the baby to bed, when it was just the 2 of us in the living room. "Julian, sit down. I need to talk to you," I said, gently patting the sofa beside me. He seemed surprised by my seriousness, but sat down. "What is it, Mom?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Son, listen to me. I know you're under a lot of stress at work, but you cannot continue this habit of showering at 3 in the morning. I've looked it up, and that's the time of night when the body's energy is at its lowest, and the temperature is coldest. Showering at that time is very dangerous. At best, you could catch a cold, but you could also have a stroke, or even suffer sudden cardiac death. You are young, with a bright future ahead of you. You have to learn to take care of your body." I said it all in one breath, filled with all of a mother's worry. I thought he would listen, or at least explain in more detail. But he didn't. Julian's face darkened, his usual patience vanished, replaced by undisguised irritation. "Mom, enjoy your retirement and stop meddling in my affairs." The door to his bedroom slammed shut with a bang, a final, definitive declaration that cut off all my attempts to show concern. Julian's cold rejection and the slamming door were like a bucket of ice water thrown in my face. From that day on, the atmosphere in the house was as heavy as lead. Julian barely spoke to me, avoiding my gaze and treating me like I was invisible. It was at that moment, when my focus shifted from the strange nightly sounds, that I began to pay closer attention to the other person in this silent tragedy, my daughter-in-law, Clara. One afternoon, we were chopping vegetables together in the kitchen. As Clara reached for a basket in an upper cabinet, the sleeve of her soft, 3/4 sleeve blouse slid down, revealing her fair wrist. And what I saw was a patch of purple and blue, mixed with faint yellow, clearly imprinted on her delicate skin. The shape of the bruise was odd, not like a normal bump, but more like the mark left by 5 fingers gripping with immense force. My heart skipped a beat. A feeling so familiar it was horrifying washed over me. I quickly grabbed her hand, my voice unable to hide my alarm. "My goodness, Clara, your wrist. What happened to your wrist?" Clara jumped as if she'd been electrocuted, yanking her hand back and hastily pulling down her sleeve to cover it. She was clearly flustered, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. It's nothing, Mom," she stammered. "Yesterday, I was in a hurry and accidentally bumped into the corner of my desk. My skin is just thin. It bruises easily." She kept her head down, unable to look me in the eye. A clumsy lie. I had lived for nearly 70 years. As a former victim of domestic violence, I knew all too well the difference between a bruise from a fall and a bruise from being gripped. The marks on her wrist were the signature of an angry hand. My heart tightened. The shadow of my abusive husband suddenly reappeared before me. During his fits of rage, he would grab my arm and drag me, leaving the exact same marks. And just like Clara now, I used to lie to neighbors and friends with absurd excuses like falling down the stairs or bumping into a door. History was repeating itself in the most cruel way, right before my eyes, in my own son's home. I couldn't bring myself to expose her lie. I knew that once a victim chooses to hide, outside questioning only makes them retreat further into their shell of fear. I just said softly, "You need to be more careful next time. A woman must know how to protect herself." Clara just mumbled a quiet okay and then made an excuse to go to the bathroom. I watched her slender, lonely back as she walked away, my heart aching. My suspicions grew with each passing day. I began to see everything through a new filter, a filter of harsh reality. A few days later, I saw another sign. When she woke up in the morning, she kept her head down, avoiding conversation. When I called out to her, I saw that her eyes were red and swollen, clearly from a long night of crying. "Clara, what's wrong with your eyes?" I asked with concern. "Did you not sleep well?" This time, she seemed prepared with another lie. "Oh, I went out on the balcony for some fresh air last night, and a mosquito or some bug must have bitten my eyelid. It was so itchy. I rubbed it, and that's why it's swollen, Mom. A bug. On the 18th floor of a condo with screens on every window. The lies were becoming more and more ridiculous. And then there was the sound of the shower at 3 in the morning. The memory took me back again. After every beating, after every torment, my husband had a strange habit. He would go into the bathroom and rinse himself with cold water for a long time, as if trying to wash away his sin, to wash away the rage that had just erupted, as if the water could cleanse him of his inner demons, allowing him to wake up the next morning as if nothing had happened. The sound of water from the bathroom. This time, I didn't stay in bed. My heart was pounding so violently I could hear it in my ears. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I gently threw back the covers, my feet landing on the cold floor. Step by step, I made my way towards the bathroom without a sound. A lifetime as a teacher had taught me patience and caution, and I had never needed them more than at this moment. The hallway was pitch black, with only a faint sliver of light seeping from under the bathroom door. As I got closer, I heard more than just the water. I heard a suppressed gasp, a faint whimper, and my son's low, cold, threatening whisper. "Do you dare to talk back to me again?" "Huh?" My feet felt as if they were nailed to the floor. I had reached the bathroom door, and by some cruel twist of fate, it wasn't fully closed. A small crack remained, just wide enough for me to see inside. Trembling, I braced myself against the wall and slowly brought my eye to the crack. The scene inside crashed into my vision. My entire body went rigid. My breathing stopped. Under the harsh, white light of the bathroom, my son, Julian, was standing there. He wasn't undressed, he was still in his pajamas, but he was soaked to the bone. And in front of him, under the rushing stream of cold water from the shower head, was Clara. She too was fully clothed in her pajamas, drenched, her long hair plastered to her pale face. Julian had one hand tangled tightly in her hair, yanking her head back, forcing her to endure the icy torrent. His face, the face of the son I had raised, now wore the same cruel and cold rage I had seen on my husband's face countless times. He didn't shout. He just held his wife firmly, and with his other hand, he slapped her hard across her pale cheek. A sharp crack echoed over the sound of the water. Clara swayed, her body going limp, but her hair was still held tight. She didn't dare to cry out loud. Only a suppressed, desperate whimper escaped her throat. Her slender body shivered violently, from the cold and from fear. I said, "Will you ever talk back to me again?" Julian repeated, his voice squeezed through clenched teeth. My entire world collapsed. All my suspicions, all my vague fears, had now become a raw, terrifying, bloody reality right before my eyes. My first instinct was to burst in, to scream, to pull my son away, to protect Clara. But in that instant, an ice-cold current shot through my spine, locking every muscle in place. The scene before me blurred, overlapping with another memory, a dark memory I had buried for years. I no longer saw Julian and Clara. I saw my husband, his eyes red from drink, grabbing my hair and forcing my head into the rain barrel in the backyard. I heard his curses, felt the searing pain at the roots of my hair, the suffocating sensation of water rushing into my nose and mouth. I felt the absolute powerlessness of struggling in despair. That bone-deep terror, resurrected after more than a decade, was stronger than maternal love, more powerful than reason. It was a conditioned reflex. It roared in my head, "Run. Don't make a sound. Don't provoke him, or you'll be next." My body obeyed that command. My legs didn't rush forward. Instead, they instinctively backed away, turned, and ran. I ran back to my room in one breath, not daring to look back. I threw myself onto the bed and pulled the covers over my head, like a wounded animal seeking a hiding place. I lay there, trembling all over, biting my lip to keep from crying out. The water in the bathroom was still running, rhythmic and cruel, the background music to my family's tragedy, to my own cowardice. Then, the memories came flooding back, unstoppable. The hellish years of living with my abusive husband flashed before my eyes. The unprovoked beatings just because a meal wasn't to his liking or a word was said incorrectly. The long nights I held my own bruised body, crying silently, terrified my son in the next room would hear. The mornings I had to cover the bruises on my face with foundation. Before going to teach, having to lie to my colleagues that I had fallen off my bike. For over a decade, I lived like that, until the day he received his death sentence from the hospital. The day he died from his illness, I didn't cry. I only felt a sense of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. I thought I was free, but I was wrong. The demon had not died with my husband. It had been resurrected, possessing the very son I cherished most. I had spent a lifetime trying to correct him, to teach him not to follow in his father's footsteps. But in the end, the violent blood still flowed in his veins. I had failed, completely and utterly. Tears began to stream down my face, no longer held back. I wasn't just crying for Clara. I was crying for my own tragic life, for a mother's powerlessness, for this cruel reality. I had escaped one cage, only to have indirectly pushed another woman into an identical one, a cage controlled by my own son. After a long time, the water stopped. The house fell silent again, but this silence was more terrifying than the noise. It was thick with guilt and unspoken pain. I knew that in the next room, my son was probably sleeping soundly after his cleansing, while my daughter-in-law was lying there, alone, licking her physical and spiritual wounds. I lay there, my tears dried, the fear passed, the pain settled, leaving only a bone-chilling clarity. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't change my son, and I didn't have the courage to confront him, to save Clara. I had fought that demon once in my life, and it had drained all my strength. I couldn't fight it again. Staying here, I would slowly wither away in guilt and fear. My only choice, the only way out for the rest of my life, was not this luxurious condo, but another place, a place where I could find peace, even if it was a lonely peace. The next day I had to leave, quietly and decisively. The night of terror gave way to an unusually clear and peaceful morning. Sunlight streamed through the window, warm and pure, a stark contrast to the festering darkness in my soul. I hadn't slept a wink, but my mind was exceptionally clear. The tears had run dry, and last night's extreme fear and pain seemed to have been distilled into a cold, firm resolve. I got out of bed, went to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. Before me was a 65-year-old woman, her hair white, her eyes sunken, her wrinkles etched with sorrow. But in those eyes, there was no longer submission or fear. It was the look of a person who had reached the depths of despair and found the only path to survival. I calmly prepared my last breakfast here. The dining table was set as usual, but the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. I ate quietly, slowly, and deliberately. Then, I began to speak to my two children. "Julian, Clara," I began, my voice not trembling in the slightest. "I have something to say." Julian looked somewhat impatient. "What is it, Mom? Go ahead." I looked directly into my son's eyes, then turned to my daughter-in-law, who was staring at her plate, and said each word clearly. "I thought about it all night last night, and I've decided. I'm going to move into a retirement community." They were both stunned. Julian was the first to react, his calm facade shattering. He practically shouted, "You what? A retirement community? Why? Your son is right here. You want for nothing in this big house, and you want to move there? Do you want people to talk behind my back? I don't approve." His objection, I knew, stemmed not from love, but from pride and selfishness. He was afraid of public opinion, afraid of tarnishing his image as a successful, devoted son. Clara also looked up sharply, her wide eyes filled with panic and a hint of desperate pleading. She stammered, Mom, did we do something wrong to make you unhappy? Please don't go, Mom. Stay here with us. It's not your fault. This place is wonderful. But I've realized that city life just isn't for me. I want you two to have your privacy. Newlyweds need their own life, and it's inconvenient for me to be here." I paused, then continued, painting a false, bright picture. "Besides, I've looked into it. The retirement communities these days are very nice, like little resorts. There are lots of friends, my own age, book clubs, chess clubs, and gardens I can tend to. I think I'll be happier with that kind of life. It's more suitable for an old woman like me." Julian continued to object vehemently, but his arguments only circled around losing face and being seen as irresponsible. I just listened in silence, letting him vent his anger. When he finished, I looked at him, my tone resolute. I have made up my mind. This is my life, and I want to spend my final years in my own way. There's no need to say any more. The unwavering determination in my eyes seemed to catch Julian by surprise. He was used to giving orders, to imposing his will. But today, he had hit a solid wall. He looked at me, then at Clara, and finally fell into a sullen silence. Clara began to cry, tears streaking her foundation. "Mom," I reached out and gently took her cold hand. "Hush now, child. Don't cry. You can come visit me on the weekends. That will be enough for me." That morning, I packed my own bags. It was just a few clothes and books, the same as when I arrived. Julian had already called and arranged for a room at a high-end retirement community on the outskirts of the city, perhaps to assuage his own guilt and to save face. As I walked to the door with my suitcase, I took one last look at the condo, a place of luxury and beauty, yet so cold and full of pain. I looked at my son, the child in whom I had placed all my hopes, now just a shell with a corrupted soul, which filled me with a deep, unknowable sadness. I looked at my daughter-in-law, frail and pale, hiding by the door, her eyes filled with despair. Life in the retirement community was so peaceful it felt almost unreal. There were no harsh words, no slamming doors, and most importantly, no sound of a rushing shower at 3 a.m. Every day passed in a predictable rhythm. Morning exercises, breakfast with new friends, reading in the library, and afternoon walks in the sun-drenched garden. I had found the physical safety I sought, but my soul was not at peace. Every time I closed my eyes at night, the image of Clara's drenched hair, her pale face, and her desperate eyes would flash in my mind, tormenting me. The sharp sound of my son's hand hitting his wife's face still echoed in my ears. The peace I had found here was bought with my daughter-in-law's suffering, which turned this place into a prison of guilt. I had saved myself, but I had abandoned another soul who was slowly sinking into hell. One afternoon, as I was sitting quietly on a stone bench in the garden, a familiar voice called out, "Excuse me, are you Eleanor, the English teacher?" I looked up and immediately recognized Margaret, a former colleague of mine who had retired a few years before me. She hadn't changed much, still with the same warm smile and bright eyes. This unexpected reunion eased some of my loneliness. We eagerly asked about each other's health, talked about our children, and reminisced about the old days. Just then, a young woman with a delicate face, but a deep sadness in her eyes walked over. "Mom, I brought you some fruit. This is my daughter Leah," Margaret introduced her. "Leah, say hello to Mrs. Eleanor." Looking at Leah, for a moment, I saw a reflection of Clara in her. The same submissive demeanor, the same forced smile trying to hide an inner exhaustion. After Leah said hello and left, Margaret sighed, watching her daughters retreating back with a look of heartache. Seeing my expression, Margaret seemed to guess something. "Eleanor, you look like you have a lot on your mind. Even here, you can't find peace, can you?" Her words were like a key, unlocking the emotional floodgates I had kept tightly shut. Guilt, fear, and a sense of sin all came pouring out. I told her everything, holding nothing back. I told her about my successful but brutal son, my pitiful daughter-in-law, the horrifying scene behind the bathroom door, and my own cowardice. Margaret just listened quietly. When I finished, there was no blame in her eyes, only compassion as she took my hand and patted it gently. "You've been through too much," she said, her voice full of sympathy. "Hearing your story reminds me of what happened with my Leah." Then, she began to tell me her daughter's story. Leah had also been in an abusive marriage. Her husband was an educated, seemingly gentle man, but he was a monster in private. "At first, I was just as clueless, my friend," Margaret said, shaking her head with regret. "I used to tell her, 'Honey, as a wife, you have to be patient with your husband. That's how you keep a family together.' I thought her patience would change him, but I was wrong, so terribly wrong." She explained that Leah's submissiveness only made her son-in-law more aggressive, progressing from verbal abuse to pushing and shoving, and then to full-blown beatings. One day, Margaret's voice broke. She came home with a black eye, but what froze me wasn't the bruise, it was her eyes. Her eyes then, my friend. They were no longer sad, no longer in pain. They were empty. They were the eyes of someone whose spirit had died. In that moment, I knew I couldn't keep being wrong. Tears streamed down her face. I cried, and I apologized to my daughter. I told her she had to get a divorce, that she had to escape that hell, no matter the cost. Leah's divorce was incredibly difficult. The husband constantly threatened her, terrorized her emotionally, saying he would ruin her family's reputation if she left him. But this time, with her mother by her side, Leah found her strength. Together they hired a lawyer, gathered evidence, and fought a grueling court battle. In the end, Leah was free. After hearing Margaret's story, I could only sit in silence. The parallels between Leah and Clara were heartbreakingly similar. Margaret looked me straight in the eye, her voice both sympathetic and powerfully motivating. "Eleanor, your daughter-in-law is likely in the same place my daughter was. Even though you are his mother, the one who carried him for 9 months, your daughter-in-law is someone else's child. She was loved and cherished by her own parents. Imagine how their hearts would break if they knew your son was abusing her like this. What parent in the world doesn't ache for their own child?" Every word from Margaret was like a knife in my heart. "I know, Margaret, I know all of it," I gasped. "But maybe because of my own past, because I went through it myself, it left such a deep scar. I'm still so scared. The nightmare is still so vivid, like it happened yesterday." "I understand." Margaret squeezed my hand tighter. "And it's precisely because you know that pain better than anyone that you cannot let it continue." She looked at me, her gaze serious. "So, as the mother of a son who is abusing his wife, and as a woman who was once a victim herself, if you can no longer persuade your son, then you must help your daughter-in-law. Help her escape that hellish marriage. Help her get out." Margaret's words echoed in my mind. I had run away to find my own peace, but true peace isn't the safety of hiding in a shell. It's the peace of the soul, and my soul would never be at peace if I knew I had abandoned someone who needed help. I was wrong. I thought I was powerless. I couldn't confront my son head-on, but I could be Clara's ally, a silent source of support. I didn't have the strength to fight, but I could put the weapon in her hand and show her the way. A new decision, one far more powerful than the decision to leave, formed in my heart. I looked at Margaret and nodded resolutely. "Thank you. I know what I have to do." After talking with Margaret, it was as if I had woken from a dream. For the next few days, I planned my strategy, considering the advice a lawyer had given me. My heart was no longer heavy with cowardice, but filled with a calm determination, waiting for the right moment. And that moment came sooner than I expected. A week after I moved into the retirement community, Clara came to visit me. She carried a large basket of expensive fruit, her face still wearing that gentle yet strained smile. "Mom," she said, her voice tinged with apology. "I'm so sorry, things have been so busy at home. This is the first chance I've had to come see you." I looked at my daughter-in-law. She tried to hide her fatigue with makeup, but the exhaustion in her eyes was unmistakable. As she got closer, in the daylight, I could clearly see a faint, yellowish-blue bruise near her hairline. My heart clenched. My son had done it again. I led her to the stone bench in the garden where I had spoken with Margaret. I let her talk about trivial things at home, listening patiently, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. When her conversation trailed off, I took a deep breath, looked her directly in the eye, and said, my voice not harsh, but filled with infinite sadness, "Clara, the bruise on your forehead. Did you bump into something again?" Clara flinched, instinctively reaching up to touch her forehead. The panic on her face was palpable. No, I didn't let her invent another lie. I took her cold, thin hands in mine. "Don't lie to me anymore, Clara. I know everything." Clara's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. "Mom, what are you saying? What do you know?" "The night I decided to leave," I said slowly, each word a hammer blow. "I saw. In the bathroom. I saw everything." Clara's face went white as a sheet. She began to tremble, but then, like a deep-seated conditioned reflex, she rushed to deny it. "No, that's not it, Mom. You must have seen wrong. You must have. Julian, he just has a short temper. He gets like that when he's stressed from work. But he loves me and the baby, Don't think so badly of him. He's miserable too, Mom. She cried as she spoke, her words defending her abuser sounding so pitiful. Looking at her, I saw myself 30 years ago. I didn't interrupt, just let her finish. When her faint defense trailed off, I pulled her close and wrapped my arms around her thin shoulders. Stop lying to me, and stop lying to yourself, my child. My voice broke. The things you just said. I said them myself for almost 20 years. I also used to say the bruises on my body were from my own carelessness. But you and I, we both know that's not the truth, don't we? It was this empathy, coming from a fellow victim, that completely shattered Clara's last line of defense. She couldn't hold it together anymore. She buried her head in my shoulder and began to sob, not the suppressed whimpers of before, but a raw, gut-wrenching cry, releasing years of pent-up pain, humiliation, and resentment. I just held her quietly, letting her cry it all out. When her sobs finally subsided into sniffles, she began to talk. And the truth she revealed was even more horrifying than I had imagined. He hits me often, Mom, she said, her voice a thin whisper, for no reason. Sometimes just because the soup is a little too salty, sometimes just because he lost a contract at work. He takes all his frustration out on me. She choked back a sob. He humiliates me, calls me a freeloader, a waste of space. He even called me a barren hen, saying our family had the worst luck to have married me. Clara looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, full of regret. You know, Mom, before I married Julian, I was a respected teacher at a prestigious private school. I loved my job. But back then, he said something to me, and I believed him. What did he say? He said, "Quit your job. I'll take care of you. Why should a woman work so hard? Just stay home and be a good wife and mother." I believed his promise. I gave up my career, my dreams, and dedicated myself to this family. But I never imagined that "I'll take care of you" was actually a life sentence, turning me into a dependent with no voice, someone he could trample on at will. She had tried many times to go back to work, to regain her independence. But every time she brought it up, Julian would fly into a rage, hit her, lock her in the house, and smash her phone. She was completely isolated. Then why? Why didn't you divorce him? I asked the question to which I already knew the answer. Clara shook her head in despair. I've thought about it so many times, Mom. But he won't allow it. He threatened me. He said if I dared to bring it up, he would make life hell for me and my family. He said that since I haven't worked in years and have no income, I have nothing. If we divorced, I would leave with nothing, and the court would never side with me. He said I would live a miserable life and would never get back on my feet. Hearing this, I squeezed her hand tightly. My son's cruelty and cunning had far surpassed his father's. He was not only a physical abuser, but a psychological one, using every means to bind, control, and gradually destroy his wife's life. I waited for Clara to finish crying and helped her dry her tears. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice no longer that of a mother-in-law, but an ally. Don't be afraid, child. I am here. I will not leave you alone in that hell. You are not alone, I continued, my tone incredibly firm, and you will not leave with nothing. Clara looked at me, her eyes still clouded with doubt and fear. It was then that I revealed my plan. I've already spoken to a lawyer. These few words were like a shot of adrenaline, causing a flicker of light to appear in Clara's empty eyes. For the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of hope. We will fight this together, I said, quietly and smartly. My son turned you into a victim. Now, we will use that to build the case against him. Seeing my daughter-in-law break down in my arms, her thin body trembling with suppressed sobs, I truly understood my own weakness. I had thought of myself as a victim, with the right to run away and seek peace. But I was wrong. When I witnessed the same tragedy destroying another life, my silence was complicity. My departure was not liberation, but a cruel abandonment. I am so sorry, Clara, I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotion. I should have noticed sooner. I should have been stronger. Not just for myself, but for you. Clara shook her head but said nothing, just clung to my sleeve like a child who had found her only lifeline. I knew apologies were meaningless now. What this child needed was not sympathy, but a way out, a concrete plan. I waited for her to calm down, and then, word by word, with a resolve I had never felt before, I said, "Child, listen to me. This battle won't be easy, but you are not alone. From this moment on, I will be on your side, and I will see you through to the end. We are going to make him pay for everything he's done." It was the first time I had referred to my son so coldly as him. In my heart, Julian was no longer my beloved son, but a criminal who needed to be brought to justice. "But I'm so scared, Mom," Clara whispered. "He'll never let me go." "That's because before, you were alone," I said with certainty. "Now you have me, and more importantly, we have the law." I went to see Mr. Liu. At the mention of Mr. Liu's name, Clara's eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Liu is an old classmate of mine, a very righteous man, and the best divorce attorney in this city. He gave me a plan. Now, we are going to go over it together. You must remain completely calm and do exactly as I say, do you understand? And so, in a quiet corner of the retirement community's garden, two women, one old and one young, both victims of domestic violence, plotted their counterattack. According to Mr. Liu, the most important thing right now is to gather evidence, I explained. Your words in court can be denied, but evidence cannot. Do you understand? Evidence. First, from now on, whenever he verbally abuses or threatens you, find a way to secretly record it on your phone. Just keep your phone in your pocket with the recording app already running. Second, every time he lays a hand on you, even if it's just a slap or a small bruise, you must immediately go to the bathroom, lock the door, and take a picture of the injury. Send those pictures to a secret email address that only you and I know. Third, start keeping a diary. Document every single abusive word and action, every single day. And finally, and this is very important, you must try to find and photograph all documents related to his finances and income employment contracts, bank statements, property deeds, anything you can find. This is to counter his threat of leaving you with nothing. Clara's face turned pale. "What if he finds out?" "I know this is dangerous," Mom said, "but freedom is never free. You have to be brave, just this one time." My words seemed to strike a chord deep inside her. She nodded, her expression shifting from fear to determination. "There's one last step," I said. "After we have enough evidence, you must be the one to formally ask for a divorce." Clara trembled. "He'll kill me. He'll go insane." "I know. But that is when he is most likely to reveal his true, monstrous nature. You don't have to confront him. You just have to say the words, and then do whatever it takes to get out of that house immediately. Run to a friend's place, or take a cab straight here to me. Mr. Liu and I will handle the rest. We will use his rage against him in court." That afternoon when Clara left, she still looked afraid, but she was no longer desperate. There was purpose in her step, a plan in her eyes. She was transforming from a passive victim into a reluctant warrior, returning to the lion's den to gather weapons for the final battle of her life. The following days were the longest of my life. I lived in a state of constant anxiety, my phone always in my hand. Every email from Clara's secret account made my heart clench. A photo of a bruised arm, an audio file of Julian screaming the most vile insults at his wife, a short diary entry. "He hit me again today, because I accidentally broke a bowl." Each piece of evidence was a knife in my heart, but it was also a brick paving the road to my daughter-in-law's freedom. I forwarded everything to Mr. Liu. He said we already had more than enough to win the case. We just needed one last thing, for Clara to officially ask for a divorce, to light the final fuse. After nearly 2 weeks of evidence gathering, the day finally came. In the morning, I received a text message from Clara. "Mom, I'm going to tell him tonight." That day, I couldn't sit still. I prayed for her safety. By evening, my heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I stared at my phone, waiting. Around 10 o'clock at night, my phone rang. It was Clara's number. I snatched it up. "Hello? Clara? How are you?" "Mom," the voice on the other end was trembling and frantic. I told him." "What did he do? Did he do anything to you?" He. Clara's words were cut off by a scream, followed by Julian's furious roar. Who do you think you're calling? Give me the phone." Then came the sound of something smashing, and the line went dead. "Clara? Clara?" I yelled desperately into the phone, but was met with only a cold, dead tone. My hands and feet went numb. Cold sweat dripped down my back. I knew something had happened. I redialed again and again, dozens of times, but no one answered. I imagined the horrifying scene unfolding in that condo, the scene I had witnessed once before. My son, the monster in human skin, was torturing his wife. About half an hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was from Julian's number. I answered with a trembling hand. "Hello? Mom?" The voice on the other end was ice cold, filled with rage and menace. "What have you been telling her? Who gave you the right to incite my wife to cause trouble? Are you trying to tear my family apart? Julian, what are you doing? You can't hurt Clara." He let out a cold laugh. "Hurt her? I'm just teaching my wife a lesson. I've given her a lesson she'll never forget. Let's see if she ever dares to mention divorce again." Then his voice turned cruel. "And you listen to me. From this day on, I won't let her take a single step out of this house, and she will never see you again. You just stay put in that retirement home." With that, he hung up. I was stunned. The plan had failed at the most critical step. Not only had Clara not escaped, but she had been brutally beaten and was now being held captive. All contact was cut off. She was in mortal danger. I was truly panicked. I immediately dialed Mr. Liu's number. Mr. Liu, something's happened." My voice was shaking. "My son," he found out. "He hit the girl, and he's locked her in the room. We have to do something. We have to get her out, now." The fight for Clara's freedom had entered its most difficult and dangerous phase. This was no longer a legal battle on paper, but a real-life rescue mission. After that terrifying phone call with Julian, Mr. Liu and I took immediate action. We reported him to the police for domestic violence and unlawful imprisonment. With official intervention, my son was forced to open the door, and they rescued a terrified Clara, her body covered in fresh bruises. She was taken to the hospital to have her injuries documented, and Mr. Liu arranged for her to stay in a safe, temporary location. The plan was exposed. The war had moved from the shadows into the open. I knew it was only a matter of time before Julian came looking for me. Sure enough, 2 days later, he appeared at the retirement community. He had lost his usual calm and composed demeanor. Though still dressed in an expensive suit, his face was haggard, and his eyes were bloodshot from rage and lack of sleep. He looked like a cornered animal. He stormed up to me as I was reading in the garden, not even bothering with a greeting, his voice dripping with accusation. "Mom, what are you doing? You're this old, and you still want to stir up trouble? My family's happiness, my happiness, how could you bear to destroy it with your own hands?" I calmly closed my book and set it aside. The fear inside me was gone, replaced by a cold disappointment. "Happiness?" I looked him straight in the eye. "You call the hell you created for Clara happiness? You call your fists and your insults happiness? Don't you dare use that word. You don't deserve it. That's my private family business," he roared, causing a few people nearby to turn and stare. I was teaching my wife a lesson. You have to keep a woman in her place, or she'll get out of control and walk all over you. You're a woman. You should have understood and taught your daughter-in-law her place. Instead, you incited her to make trouble. Hearing those words, I knew my son was beyond saving. His father's toxic, misogynistic ideology had seeped deep into his bones, becoming even more twisted and cunning. "You're wrong, Julian," my tone was firm. "Violence isn't discipline. It's a crime. Controlling and trampling on someone isn't how you maintain happiness. It's a sign of weakness and sickness. I have been silent for too long. If you can feel any remorse now, if you can recognize your mistakes and go ask for Clara's forgiveness, maybe things can still be saved. Change before it's too late." I gave him one last chance, a faint hope that some humanity remained in him. But he scoffed at it. He let out a bitter laugh. "Change? What mistakes have I made that I need to change? I'm successful. I make money. I gave her a life of luxury. All she had to do was stay home, have children, and obey. It was you, helping her behind my back, Who gave her these delusions? You ruined everything. Our argument grew louder. I no longer held back. The one who ruined everything is you. It was your brutality that killed Clara's love. It was your selfishness that pushed this family to the brink of a cliff. Fine. Just fine, he seethed, his eyes wide with fury. Since you've chosen to side with an outsider against your own son, then you listen to me. He pointed a finger at my face, his voice sharp as a knife. If you continue to help her, if you agree to this divorce, then from this day forward, the bond between us as mother and son is severed. From now on, I will consider myself as not having a mother. My heart ached as if it were being squeezed in a vice, but I didn't back down. I had already lost my son the night I saw him torturing his wife. The person standing before me now was just a stranger wearing my son's face. Fine, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. If that is what you wish, and don't think a divorce will be that easy, he spat. I will never agree to it. I'll hire the best lawyers. I'll prove to the court that she's mentally ill, incompetent. She won't get a single penny, and she can forget about ever getting custody of any child. With that, he turned and stormed off, leaving me alone in the curious and sympathetic gazes of the people around me. I knew the real war had just begun. The legal battle unfolded exactly as Julian had threatened. He spared no expense, hiring a team of shrewd, aggressive lawyers who specialized in twisting the truth. Every piece of evidence we presented, they countered. The audio recordings, they claimed, were edited or were just normal arguments between a married couple. The photos of the bruises, they argued, could have been self-inflicted by Clara to frame her husband. The medical report documenting her injuries, they said, was the result of a fall. They even submitted a falsified medical record signed by some unscrupulous doctor, attesting that Clara suffered from a psychological disorder with a history of self-harm and persecutory delusions, causing her to fantasize about being abused. Everything slowly ground to a stalemate. Clara, after the trauma of being held captive and her husband's shameless tactics in court, was on the verge of a breakdown. She began to doubt herself, terrified she would actually lose the case, and just as her husband had threatened, lose her child and be left with nothing. The flame of hope we had just kindled was slowly being extinguished. I was frantic with worry, but could only comfort her and trust in Mr. Liu. Just as the case was about to be dismissed for lack of evidence, a miracle happened. One afternoon, as I was sitting lost in thought in my room, the phone suddenly rang. It was Clara, but her voice was no longer weary or desperate. It was clear, urgent, and punctuated with joyful sobs. "Mom! Mom! I have good news! Mom! We have hope!" "What is it, child? Tell me slowly." "The neighbors, Mom. It was the neighbors," she cried and laughed at the same time. "The residents in the building across from ours, they just installed a new high-resolution security system. They got it for security. But they never expected one of the cameras would be pointed directly at the hallway on our 18th floor. My heart began to pound. "What are you saying?" The night he locked me in, Clara's voice trembled with excitement. He dragged me out into the hallway and hit me and screamed at me. That scene, the camera recorded the entire thing. Crystal clear. The neighbor just reviewed the footage today and recognized us. I've already called Mr. Priest. Liu. Mom, I was speechless. A current of electricity ran through my entire body. It was divine providence, a piece of undeniable, unforgeable evidence that took place in a public space. Mr. Liu acted immediately. That video was like an atomic bomb dropped on the courtroom. In the footage, Julian's true nature was laid bare for all to see. His grabbing of her hair, the slaps, and the vicious threats he hurled at a defenseless woman. Faced with this irrefutable proof, Julian's legal team could no longer deny the abuse. The civil case was now at risk of becoming a criminal one. To keep their client out of jail, they had no choice but to advise Julian to accept a settlement and agree to all of our terms. Finally, the court's judgment came down. Clara's hellish marriage was officially over. Not only did she receive half of their shared assets, but based on the proven physical and psychological damages, she was also awarded a very significant sum in compensation. The day she received the divorce decree, Clara cried, but they were tears of liberation. Clara's life had turned a new page. With the assets and compensation she received, she bought a small, elegant condo in another part of the city and personally decorated it to be a real home. It was no longer a cold, gilded cage, but a space filled with sunlight and hope. On the first day she moved into her new home, the first person she came to pick up was me. Seeing my daughter-in-law's radiant smile, her clear eyes free of fear, I felt that all my efforts and worries had been worth it. "Mom, thank you," she said, hugging me tightly. "If it weren't for you, I might never have escaped." "Don't say that," I said, stroking her hair. "It's because you were brave enough. You saved yourself." We sat in her new condo, drinking tea together. Suddenly, Clara looked at me, her cheeks slightly flushed, a little shy, but her eyes sparkling with happiness. "Mom, I have some more good news to tell you." "What good news?" She placed a hand on her stomach, her voice soft. "After the divorce, I kept feeling unwell. I went for a checkup and found out I'm more than 2 months pregnant. I guess it was fate taking pity on us." "Mom," I was stunned, and then overwhelmed with immense joy. The woman who had been called a barren hen for so many years, the moment she escaped that abusive man, a new life began. It was the most precious gift, the sweetest reward for all she had endured. News of Clara's pregnancy somehow reached Julian. He tried every way to get in touch, first with Clara, then with me. He was filled with regret. He begged, "Mom, give me one last chance. I know I was wrong. I was a monster. Please, talk to Clara for me. Let me come back and take care of her and my child. I swear I'll change." Before I hung up and blocked his number, I said only one thing to him. "The night you imprisoned and beat a woman who was carrying your child, your chances ran out. You are not worthy." Clara's answer was the same. The scars on her heart were too deep. She could not forgive, could not trust such a cruel and heartless man ever again. Our lives, as a mother and daughter-in-law, continued peacefully. I often visited Clara's home, where we would cook together, take walks, and shop for the coming baby. One day, she took my hand, her gaze sincere. "Mom, my own mother passed away a long time ago. You gave me a new life. Would you adopt me as your daughter? That way, your future grandchild will have both a grandma and a maternal grandmother." I couldn't help but let the tears fall. I had lost a biological son, but heaven had blessed me with a devoted daughter and a grandchild on the way. Yes, I nodded through my tears. I would love that. I didn't move back in with her. I stayed at the retirement community where I had my friends. But her condo became my second home, a true home, not built with money or pretense, but with love, understanding, and courage. My life had been through a tremendous storm, and now, on the downward slope of my years, I had found true peace. Thank you for watching. I hope today's story has resonated with you. For those who have not yet subscribed, please don't forget to click subscribe so we can accompany you every day. Let's grow together. We'll see you in the next video. We don't provide extra food. Those were the exact words my daughter-in-law, Marlene, said as she pushed a glass of water toward me. Just water, while her entire family devoured fresh lobster right in front of my eyes. Enormous lobsters, the kind that cost $60 each, with melted butter shining under the restaurant lights. She didn't even have the decency to be subtle about it. She did it in front of everyone, with that fake smile she always uses when she wants to humiliate someone without looking like the villain of the story. And that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was seeing my son, Michael, nod his head, as if she had just said something reasonable, something fair. "You should know your place, Mom," he added, without even looking me in the eye. I stayed silent, not because I didn't have words. I had them, plenty of them, but something inside me decided to hold them back, to observe, to wait. So I just smiled slightly and said calmly, "Noted." Marlene blinked, confused for a second. I think she expected tears, apologies, maybe a scene. But I gave her none of that, just that one word, "Noted." Let me explain how I got here, how I ended up sitting in one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, watching my own family devour $60 lobsters while I had a glass of tap water in front of me. Because this story didn't start tonight. It started years ago. When I decided that being a mother meant sacrificing everything, and boy did I. Michael is my only son. I raised him alone after his father abandoned us when he was just 5 years old. I worked 3 jobs for years. I cleaned houses. I waited tables. I cooked in other people's kitchens. All so he could have what I never had: education, opportunities, a future. I paid for his entire college education, every semester, every book, every single coffee he'd grab with his friends while he studied. I supported him when he decided to change his major twice. I supported him when he met Marlene and told me she was the woman of his life. I supported him even when she started looking at me as if I were an obstacle in her perfect upper-middle-class life. I never asked for anything in return. Well, that's not entirely true. I asked for respect. I asked to be treated like his mother, not like an employee who had already served her purpose. But apparently, that was too much to ask. The invitation came a week ago. Michael called me, which was unusual because lately he only sends me short, cold text messages, the everything good or talk later kind. His voice sounded strangely kind when he said that he and Marlene wanted to invite me to dinner. To reconnect, he said. We feel like we've been distant, Mom. We want to fix things. How naive I was to believe him. I got dressed in the best thing I had, a pearl gray dress. Simple but elegant, nothing flashy. I've never been one to draw attention. I fixed my hair. I put on a little makeup. I wanted to look good for my son, to show him that even though I was 64 years old, I was still his mother, the woman who gave everything for him. When I arrived at the restaurant, they were all already seated. Michael, Marlene, and to my surprise, her parents as well. 4 people waiting for me at a table that was clearly set for 5. They greeted me with air kisses, the kind that don't touch the skin. Marlene smelled like expensive perfume, the kind that costs over $200. She was wearing a flawless beige dress and jewelry that sparkled so much it almost blinded me. "You're late, Helen," she said, looking at her gold watch. She called me Helen, not Mom. She never does. Just Helen, as if we were friends of the same age, as if there were no family hierarchy between us. "The traffic was terrible," I replied, taking a seat in the only empty chair, the one at the corner, almost as if they had wanted to hide me. The restaurant was impressive. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, pristine white tablecloths, the kind of place where every dish costs what some people earn in a week. I recognized some of the patrons, businessmen, local politicians, people with real money. I wondered how Michael could afford this. As far as I knew, his job at that consulting firm paid well, but not this well. The waiter approached with the menus. Black leather-bound menus with no prices listed. That's always the sign that everything is outrageously expensive. Marlene didn't even open hers. She snapped her fingers. Yes, she literally snapped her fingers and said, 5 lobster thermidors, the large ones, and a bottle of your best white wine. 4 lobsters. Michael corrected her gently, glancing at me out of the corner of his eye. Marlene looked at him, confused, then followed his gaze to me. And then she smiled. That smile, the same one she uses when she's about to stick the knife in. "Oh, right," she said, as if she had just remembered I existed. 4 lobsters. She turned to the waiter and added, raising her voice just enough to sound casual but so everyone could hear, "We don't provide extra food. Just water for her." The waiter blinked, uncomfortable. He looked at me, expecting me to say something, to order for myself. But before I could open my mouth, Michael intervened. "It's just that Mom already ate before she came, right?" His tone was soft but firm. It wasn't a question. It was a command in disguise. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sad background music or slow motion. Just a silent crack somewhere in my chest, where hope used to be. "Of course," I said finally. "Just water is fine." Marlene smiled, satisfied, and leaned back in her chair. The waiter nodded and walked away quickly, probably relieved to escape the tension. Marlene's parents didn't even seem to notice the exchange. They were too busy admiring the place, commenting on how exclusive it all was. And so the dinner began. Well, their dinner. I just had my glass of water. Clear, cold, silent, just as I was apparently supposed to be. The lobsters arrived 10 minutes later, 4 enormous, steaming plates, with that aroma of butter and herbs that filled the whole table. The waiter placed them carefully in front of each of them. Marlene, Michael, and her parents, who hadn't even said a word to me since I arrived. Not a hello, not a how are you, nothing. It was as if I were invisible, or worse, as if I were part of the furniture. Marlene was the first to crack the shell of her lobster. The crunch echoed in the awkward silence that had settled. She took a generous piece of white meat, dipped it in melted butter, and brought it to her mouth with deliberate slowness. She closed her eyes as if she were tasting something divine, theatrical. Everything about her was always so theatrical. Exquisite, she murmured, delicately dabbing the corners of her mouth with her napkin. Absolutely exquisite. This place never disappoints. Her mother nodded enthusiastically. It's the best restaurant in the city, without a doubt. So exclusive, so refined. Michael also began to eat, though I noticed he avoided looking at me. He kept his eyes fixed on his plate, concentrating on breaking apart the lobster as if it were the most important task in the world. Coward. My son, the man I raised to be brave, to stand up for what's right, had become a coward. I remained seated, hands in my lap, observing. My glass of water was still there, untouched. I didn't even feel like drinking it. It wasn't about thirst, it was about dignity. And in that moment, I felt like they had ripped every last ounce of it from me. Marlene's father, a heavy-set man with a gray mustache and an air of superiority, finally spoke. Michael, your mother is very quiet. Has she always been like this? He spoke about me as if I weren't there, as if I were a topic of conversation and not a real person sitting less than 3 feet away. Michael swallowed his bite before answering. Mom has always been simple, humble. You know, she comes from a different generation. Humble, Marlene repeated. And there was something venomous in the way she pronounced that word. Yes, definitely humble. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream at them that humble didn't mean invisible, that simple wasn't a synonym for stupid. But I held back, because something inside me told me to wait, to observe, to let them keep digging their own grave. Marlene's mother poured herself more wine. The bottle was already half empty. These must be such difficult times for people your age, Helen, with no stable income, not enough savings. It's a shame the older generation didn't know how to plan for their future better. There it was, the first direct blow, disguised as concern, but it was a blow nonetheless, implying that I was a burden, that I was poor, that I hadn't done anything with my life. Mom gets by just fine, Michael said, but his tone was defensive, weak, as if he didn't believe what he was saying himself. Of course, Marlene replied quickly, but her smile said the opposite. We all do what we can with what we have, although, well, some of us have more than others. Silence. A silence so thick you could cut it with a knife. No one defended me. No one said, hey, that was out of line. No one. Marlene continued eating, now with more enthusiasm. Between bites, she started talking about her life, her accomplishments, about everything she had achieved, as if she needed to constantly highlight the difference between her and me. We just closed on the new condo, she announced, looking at her parents with pride. 3 bedrooms, park view, 12th floor. It cost $450,000, but Michael and I decided it was worth the investment. Her father raised his glass. Let's toast to that, to success, to the future. Everyone raised their glasses. Except me, of course. I didn't have a glass. Just my glass of water, which now seemed to mock me with its transparency. And the best part, Marlene continued, is that we'll finally have the space we always wanted. No interruptions, no unexpected visits, no having to worry about accommodating people who just show up unannounced. She looked directly at me when she said that, directly into my eyes. She wanted me to know she was talking about me, that she was telling me, without saying it explicitly, that I was no longer welcome in their lives. Michael coughed uncomfortably. Marlene, I don't think that's necessary. Necessary what? She interrupted him, with that fake sweetness she had mastered. I'm just sharing our good news. Is there a problem with that? None, he replied, looking down again. And that's when I understood. My son wasn't just a coward. He was an accomplice. He had chosen his side a long time ago. And that side didn't include me. The waiter returned to clear some empty plates. He glanced at me, as if wondering why I was still sitting there with nothing. I felt sorry for him. He had probably seen 1,000 awkward scenes in this restaurant, but this one had to be in the top 5. Would you like dessert? He asked in a professional voice. Of course, Marlene replied immediately. Bring your best option. For 4. Again. 4. Not 5. 4. The waiter nodded and walked away. I was still there, like a ghost, like someone who had been erased from the equation but who, for some cruel reason, still occupied space in the chair. Marlene's mother leaned forward, looking at me with a mix of curiosity and condescension. Helen, dear, what do you do for work currently? Or are you already retired? It was a trap. I knew it immediately. If I said I was retired, it would confirm their narrative that I was an old woman with no purpose. If I said I worked, they would probably mock the kind of work I did. But before I could answer, Marlene spoke for me. Helen has done a little bit of everything. Cleaning, cooking, that sort of thing. Honest work. Nothing to be ashamed of course. The way she said honest work sounded like the exact opposite. It sounded like contempt, like superiority, like, thank God I never had to lower myself to that. Admirable, Marlene's father said, but his tone was condescending. Hard work should always be respected, though of course, we made sure Marlene had every opportunity so she wouldn't have to go through that. I nodded slowly. I said nothing. I just nodded. Because every word that came out of their mouths was just another reason to wait, to let them keep talking, to let them feel secure on their pedestal. Michael finally looked at me. For a second, I saw something in his eyes. Guilt? Shame? I'm not sure, but it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Mom, he said softly, are you okay? You're very quiet. I'm perfectly fine, I replied calmly. I'm just observing. Marlene let out a short laugh. Observing? How interesting. She turned to her mother. See? I told you she was quiet. The desserts arrived. 4 plates of tiramisu with edible gold flakes. Because of course, even the dessert had to be ostentatious. While they devoured their desserts, I was still there, motionless, with my glass of water that I hadn't even touched. Condensation had formed a small puddle around the base. I watched the drops slide down the glass, slow, like tears I wasn't going to shed. I wouldn't give them that pleasure. Marlene wiped her mouth with her napkin and sighed, satisfied. This is definitely my favorite restaurant. The quality is unmatched. Of course, it's not for everyone's budget. Another jab, another stab disguised as a casual comment. I wondered how many more would come before this torture ended. Her father ordered a cognac. Michael ordered a whiskey. The women ordered more wine. I was still with my water. No one offered me anything else. No one asked if I wanted at least a coffee. It was as if they had collectively decided that I didn't even deserve basic courtesies. Michael, said Marlene's father, lighting a cigar that the waiter had brought him, your wife told us you're considering that promotion at the company. That would mean more responsibilities, right? My son nodded, straightening in his chair. Yes, sir. I'd be the regional manager. A raise of almost $40,000 a year. Impressive, the man replied, blowing out the smoke slowly. That's what happens when you marry well. The right connections open doors. My brother is a partner at that firm, you know. A word from me, and that position is yours. There it was. The truth behind Michael's success. It wasn't his talent. It wasn't his effort. It was Marlene's last name. Her family's connections. Everything I had worked to give him, all the sacrifices I had made so he could get where he was, had been overshadowed by a convenient marriage. We are very grateful, Marlene said, taking Michael's hand on the table. Family is the most important thing. Knowing how to surround yourself with the right people makes all the difference. She looked at me when she said that, directly into my eyes. The message was clear. I was not the right person. I was the past. She was the future. Marlene's mother joined the conversation. It's fundamental to set boundaries, too, especially when there are people who can become a burden. We can't let misunderstood feelings stop us from moving forward. Exactly, Marlene agreed, squeezing Michael's hand. That's why we've decided to make some changes. Necessary changes for our well-being and for Chloe's. Chloe, my 4-year-old granddaughter. The little girl I watched twice a week when they needed time for themselves. The girl who called me Grandma Helen and made drawings for me on paper. Were they going to take her away from me too? What kind of changes? I asked. It was the first time I had spoken in almost 20 minutes. Marlene looked at me, surprised, as if she had forgotten I could speak. Well, Helen, since you're asking, we've decided it's better for Chloe to spend time with people who can add value to her life. A quality education. Enriching experiences. Things that, that some people just can't offer. I felt the dagger twist deeper. She was telling me I wasn't good enough for my own granddaughter. That my love, my time, my bedtime stories were worthless compared to what they considered value. Michael said nothing. He just drank his whiskey, avoiding my gaze. I understand, I said simply. I kept my voice calm, neutral. Anything else I should know? Marlene exchanged a look with her parents. There was something else. Of course there was something else. This dinner wasn't a reconciliation. It was a planned execution. Well, she began, playing with her wine glass. We also want to talk about expectations. Michael and I have built a life of a certain standard. A life that requires maintaining certain standards. And frankly, Helen, some of your appearances have been a bit embarrassing. Embarrassing? I repeated, feeling the rage begin to simmer under my skin, though my face remained serene. Don't take it the wrong way, her mother chimed in, with that fake sweetness that so resembled her daughter's. It's just that when you came to Chloe's birthday party last month, with that old dress and that grocery store cake, well, it made a certain impression on our guests. The old dress, the grocery store cake. I had worked 2 extra shifts to be able to buy that cake because I knew Chloe loved strawberries. I had worn my best dress, the same pearl gray one I was wearing now, because it was the only decent thing I owned. And still, it hadn't been enough. The guests asked who you were, Marlene continued. It was awkward having to explain that you were Michael's mother. Some even thought you were the help. Silence. A silence so heavy it seemed to crush the air at the table. And what is your point? I asked, keeping my tone firm. Marlene leaned forward. My point, Helen, is that maybe it's better if you keep your distance. At least at public events. At least when important people are around. We don't want them to think that Michael comes from, from poverty, I completed for her. From a working-class family. From a mother who broke her back to give him everything. Michael finally spoke. Mom, don't take it like that. They're just trying to what, Michael? I interrupted, looking directly at him. Erase me? Make me disappear because I don't fit into their perfect world? He looked down. It's not that. It's just that things are different now. We have to think about our future. About Chloe. You can't have a poor mother ruining your image. I finished the sentence for him. Marlene's father tapped the table gently with his hand. Come on. No need to be dramatic. No one is saying you should disappear. Just that you be more mindful. That you understand your position in this new family dynamic. My position. That word echoed in my head. My position. As if I were an employee who needed to remember her rank. As if I were a movable piece on a board they controlled. Marlene leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Besides, Helen, let's be honest. What can you really offer this family? Michael is already established. We can give Chloe everything she needs. You just don't have the resources. Or the status. Or the connections. I only have love, I said in a low voice. She let out a short, almost cruel laugh. Love doesn't pay for private universities. Love doesn't open doors in society. Love doesn't get you a seat at the right table. Ironic. Because at that moment, I was sitting at their table, but I had no place. I had no plate. I had no voice. I only had a glass of water and an infinite amount of humiliation being served as if it were part of the menu. The waiter approached again. this time with the check. He placed it discreetly near Michael, in a leather folder. My son opened it, checked the total, and pulled out his credit card without even blinking. $780, he muttered. Reasonable for 5 people. 5 people. They had included my spot in the bill, even though I hadn't eaten anything. They had paid for my humiliation, for my empty chair, for my silence. Michael signed the receipt and put his card away. Marlene retouched her lipstick using a small mirror she took from her designer handbag. Her parents chatted among themselves about a trip to Europe they were planning for next month. It was all so normal for them, so every day, as if they had just had a pleasant dinner and not a psychological torture session. I remained still, hands still in my lap, observing every detail, every gesture, every word, storing it all in my memory as evidence of this moment, of this night that would change everything. "Well," Marlene said, standing up and smoothing her dress, "I think it's time to go. We have a busy day tomorrow. The meeting with the interior decorator is at 9 o'clock. Everyone began to get up. Michael helped his mother-in-law with her coat. Marlene's father left a generous tip on the table, $40 in cash, as if wanting to demonstrate his magnanimity even to the service staff. I stayed seated. I didn't move. Something in me refused to get up just yet. As if by standing up, I would be accepting everything that had happened. I would be validating their behavior. "Mom," Michael said, looking at me impatiently. "Let's go. We have to drop Marlene's parents at their house." "In a moment," I replied calmly. "I need to use the restroom first." Marlene rolled her eyes. "Seriously? Take your purse then. We'll meet you outside." They wanted to get rid of me, quickly, as if my presence were contaminating, as if the longer I spent with them, the more risk they ran of someone important seeing us together. I stood up slowly, picked up my simple cloth purse, and walked toward the restrooms. I felt their stares on my back. They probably thought I was pathetic. An old, humiliated, defeated woman, escaping to the bathroom to cry in private. But I didn't go to the bathroom. I walked down the long hallway that led to the kitchen. It was a route I knew well. Very well. Because I had walked down that hallway hundreds of times over the last 10 years. Ever since I bought this place. Yes, this restaurant was mine. Every table, every crystal chandelier, every painting on the walls. Mine. The business I had built from scratch, after years of hard work, meticulous savings, and smart investments. The restaurant that had made me a successful entrepreneur, even though no one in my family knew it, because I had decided to keep it a secret. Michael knew I worked in restaurants, but he always assumed it was as a waitress or a line cook. I never told him the truth. I never told him I owned 3 establishments in the city, including this one, the most exclusive of them all. I never told him about my bank account with over $2 million. I never mentioned the properties I owned. Why? Because I wanted to see who my son really was, who he would become without the influence of my money. And tonight, I had finally gotten my answer. I entered the kitchen. The heat hit me immediately. The sound of pans sizzling, knives hitting cutting boards, orders being shouted in Spanish and Italian. My kitchen. My kingdom. Julian, my executive chef and general manager, saw me enter and his face lit up. He was a tall man in his 50s, with black hair slicked back and an impeccable white apron. He had worked with me since the first day I opened this place. "Mrs. Helen," he said, approaching quickly. He spoke in a low voice, so the rest of the staff wouldn't hear. "I saw you at table 22. I was going to come over and say hello, but I noticed something wasn't right." "Everything is fine," I smiled. A small but genuine smile. The first one all night. "Julian, everything is perfectly fine. Better than you can imagine." He looked at me confused. "But I saw you sitting there with no food, just water. And those people with you? Their family?" "My son and his wife," I replied. "And tonight, they've given me the most valuable gift they could possibly give me." "What gift, ma'am?" "Clarity." Julian didn't understand, but he nodded respectfully. He knew I had my reasons for everything. In 10 years, he had never questioned my decisions. And he wasn't going to start now. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "In a few minutes, I'm going to go back to that table. And when I do, I want you to come out of the kitchen. I want you to walk up to me, in front of all of them, And I want you to call me what you always call me." His eyes lit up with understanding. "Mrs. Helen." "Exactly." A smile spread across his face. Julian had met Michael once, years ago, when my son came to visit me at work. It had been brief, awkward. Michael had looked at the restaurant with disdain, as if it were embarrassing that his mother worked there. He never came back. "It will be a pleasure," Julian said, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. I left the kitchen and walked back to the dining room. Table 22 was already empty. The waiter was clearing it, picking up the used napkins, the empty glasses. All evidence of what had happened was being erased. But not from my memory. Never from my memory. I looked around the restaurant. The soft lighting, the elegant customers enjoying their dinners, the murmur of polite conversations, the piano music playing from hidden speakers. I had built all of this, with my hands, with my mind, with my determination, and tonight, finally, I was going to claim my place. I walked out of the restaurant through the main entrance. The cold night air hit my face. Michael, Marlene, and her parents were standing next to a luxurious black car parked at the entrance. The valet had brought the vehicle, and Marlene was giving him instructions about something. They saw me come out, and Michael raised his hand in a quick wave. "Well, Mom, thanks for coming. It was educational." "Very educational," Marlene agreed, that fake smile plastered on her face. "I hope you understood everything we talked about tonight, that you've understood your position." "Oh, I understood it perfectly," I replied, remaining calm. "The question is, do you understand yours?" Marlene frowned. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," I said, smiling slightly, just thinking out loud. Marlene's father opened the car door. "Well, it's been interesting to finally meet you, Helen. Michael talks about you very little, but now I understand why." That was the straw that broke the camel's back, not to make me angry, not to make me cry, but to confirm that what I was about to do was absolutely necessary. "Before you go," I said, stopping them, "there's something I forgot to mention." Michael sighed, impatient. "Mom, it's late. It can wait." "No," I replied firmly. "It can't wait. In fact, I think this is the perfect time. Let's go back inside for a moment." "Just a moment." Marlene let out a huff of frustration. "Seriously? Now you're going to make a scene." "Not a scene," I said, walking back toward the restaurant entrance. "Just a clarification. I'll wait for you inside." I didn't wait for their answer. I just walked back in, knowing their curiosity would bring them back. And I was right. I heard their footsteps behind me, their murmurs of confusion and irritation. I walked straight to table 22, which had already been reset for the next guests. I stood next to it, waiting for them to arrive. Michael was the first to approach. "Mom, what are you doing? You're embarrassing us." "Embarrassing you?" I repeated softly. "How interesting that you use those words. Tell me, Michael, how do you think I felt for the last 2 hours?" Michael opened his mouth to answer, but Marlene cut him off. "Look, Helen, I don't know what you're trying to do, but we've had enough drama for one night. If you want to play the victim, do it some other time and some other place." Marlene's parents had approached too, looking at me with a mix of confusion and irritation. Her father checked his watch ostentatiously. "We really have to go. We have important engagements tomorrow." "This won't take long," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I just want to make sure we all understood what happened here tonight." "What happened," Marlene said with exasperation, "was a family dinner where necessary boundaries were set. Boundaries that, frankly, should have been set a long time ago." "Boundaries," I repeated, savoring the word. "How interesting. Like the boundary of not giving me food because I'm not valuable enough to share the table?" Michael blushed. "Mom, I already explained that." "You explained nothing." I interrupted him, and for the first time all night, my voice had an edge. "You sat me at a table, gave me water, and let me watch all of you eat lobster while you told me I don't deserve a place in this family." "You're exaggerating," Marlene muttered, crossing her arms. "Exaggerating," I said, looking directly at her. "Tell me, Marlene, what do you call it when you invite someone to dinner and deprive them of food? What do you call it when you deliberately humiliate someone in front of others?" What do you call it when you tell a mother she isn't good enough to see her own granddaughter? The silence that followed was tense. Some customers at nearby tables had started to look. The waiter who had served us had stopped nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Marlene's mother stepped forward. Look, dear, I understand your feelings are hurt, but sometimes the truth hurts. And the truth is, Michael has surpassed his origins. He has built something better, and that requires leaving certain attachments behind. Attachments? I repeated, feeling how every word was another brick in the wall I was building between us. That's what you call a mother who sacrificed everything for her son. A sacrifice nobody asked you for. Marlene snapped suddenly, and there was anger in her voice now. Nobody forced you to be a single mother. Nobody forced you to work mediocre jobs. Those were your decisions, and frankly, you can't expect Michael to carry your poverty forever. There it was, the truth without filters, without pretense, raw and cruel. Michael said nothing. He didn't defend me. He just stared at the floor, like a child waiting for a storm to pass. I understand, I said finally. So let me ask you something. How do you like this restaurant? The question took them by surprise. Marlene frowned. What? The restaurant, I repeated, making a wide gesture with my hand. Did you like it? Did you find it high quality? Exclusive enough for you? Marlene exchanged a confused look with Michael. It's excellent. You know that. It's one of the best in the city. Why are you asking? Just curious, I replied. Because earlier you said I had only worked mediocre jobs. Cleaning, cooking, that sort of thing. And you're right. I worked cleaning houses for years. I worked in kitchens for even more years. What are you getting at? Marlene's father asked, losing his patience. I'm getting to the fact that I did indeed work in kitchens, I continued, including the kitchen of this restaurant. In fact, I spent many hours in that kitchen, developing the menu, training the staff, making sure every dish that went out was perfect. Michael looked up, confused. What are you talking about? I'm talking about my work, Michael. My mediocre job, as Marlene called it. I'm talking about the long hours I spent building something from scratch. Something that is apparently good enough for you. Marlene let out a nervous laugh. Helen, I don't think you understand. This restaurant is owned by… Wait, her face changed. You work here? You're a cook here? I worked here, I corrected. But not as a cook. At that moment, as if perfectly orchestrated, Julian came out of the kitchen. He was wearing his immaculate uniform, his posture erect, his expression professional but with a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. He walked directly toward us, and every eye in the restaurant seemed to follow him. He stopped in front of me, with a slight bow. He said, in a loud, clear voice, Mrs. Helen, pardon the interruption. There's a matter in the office that requires your attention. Could you please review it before you leave for the night? The silence was absolute. Michael blinked. Mrs. Helen? Julian glanced at him briefly before turning his attention back to me. Yes, Mrs. Helen, the owner of this establishment. Marlene's jaw dropped. Literally. Her jaw fell open and her eyes went wide as plates. What? Owner, Julian repeated, as if explaining something to a child. The person who signs my paycheck every month. The person who built this place 10 years ago and turned it into what it is today. Marlene's father took a step back, as if he had just been physically struck. His wife brought a hand to her mouth. Michael stared at me, as if he were seeing me for the first time. Mom, you? Yes, I said simply. Me, the woman who apparently has no resources. The woman who has no status. The woman who embarrasses her family with her old dresses and her grocery store cakes. That woman owns the restaurant where you all just spent $780 to humiliate me. Marlene tried to speak, but no words came out. She opened and closed her mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Impossible, she finally muttered. This is… how? How, I repeated. With those mediocre jobs you despise so much. With every dollar I saved for years. With smart investments. With hard work. With sacrifice. Everything that apparently means nothing to you. Julian was still standing next to me, like a silent guardian. Some of the kitchen staff had come out and were watching from a distance. The customers at nearby tables were no longer hiding their interest. This had become a spectacle. "But you said you worked in restaurants," Michael stammered. "You said you waited tables, that you cooked." "And I did," I confirmed. "I did all of that while I was building my business, while I was learning every aspect of this industry, while I was investing every penny I earned into growing something worthwhile, something that, ironically, you consider good enough for your standards." Marlene's father found his voice. "If you're so successful, why did you never say so? Why keep it a secret?" "Because I wanted to know," I replied, looking him straight in the eye, who my son really was without the influence of my money. I wanted to see if he would love me for who I am, not for what I have. And tonight, I got my answer. Michael turned pale. "Mom, I didn't know." "Exactly," I interrupted. "You didn't know. And without knowing, you treated me like trash. You sat me at this table, denied me food, humiliated me in front of your in-laws, and told me I should know my place." Marlene finally regained her speech, though her voice was trembling. Wait, this doesn't make sense. If you have so much money, why do you live in that tiny apartment? Why do you wear simple clothes? Why did you bring a grocery store cake to Chloe's birthday?" "Because money doesn't define who I am," I answered calmly. "I live modestly because I choose to. I wear simple clothes because I'm comfortable that way. And I bought that cake because my granddaughter loves strawberries. And that cake had the freshest strawberries I could find. I don't need to prove my worth to anyone with designer labels or luxury cars." "But you could have told us," Michael insisted, and there was something desperate in his voice now. "You could have told us you had all this." "For what?" I asked, and I let the question hang in the air for a moment. "So you would treat me well? So you would respect me?" "Respect isn't bought, Michael. It's earned, or it should be earned, simply by virtue of me being your mother." Julian cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Helen, would you like me to call security? If these people are making you uncomfortable?" "That won't be necessary, Julian," I said, touching his arm briefly. "They're my family. Or at least, they were." Those last words hit like a hammer. I saw the impact on Michael's face, the tears that began to form in his eyes. "Mom, please," he said, taking a step toward me. We didn't know. If we had known—" "If you had known? What?" I interrupted. "You would have treated me differently? You would have served me lobster instead of water? You would have spoken to me with respect instead of contempt?" "That is exactly why I never told you. Because a son's love for his mother shouldn't depend on her bank account." Marlene had turned pale, but there was something else in her expression now. Something calculating. I could see the wheels turning in her head, recalculating, reevaluating. "Helen," she said, her voice having completely changed its tone. "I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We never wanted—" "No," I cut her off sharply. "Don't do that. Don't try to rewrite what happened just 20 minutes ago. You said exactly what you meant to say. You did exactly what you meant to do. And now you have to live with the consequences." Her father cleared his throat. "Uncomfortable. Well, this is certainly unexpected. Marlene, dear, maybe we should discuss this in private, as a family." "As a family," I repeated, and I couldn't help a bitter laugh. "Half an hour ago, you told me I wasn't family, that I was a burden, that I was an embarrassment, that I should keep my distance." Marlene's mother tried to intervene with her fake, sweet voice. "Helen, dear, we all say things when we're tired or stressed. Surely you can forgive a little." "A little what?" I interrupted. "A little mistake? A little humiliation? You left me without food at a family dinner. You treated me as if I were invisible. You told me I wasn't good enough for my own granddaughter. That is not a little mistake. It's a revelation of character." The entire restaurant seemed to be holding its breath. The waiters had stopped. The customers were pretending to look at their plates, but they were clearly listening to every word. This moment had become something bigger than me, bigger than them. It had become a public lesson. Michael took another step toward me, and now the tears were streaming down his face. "Mom, please, you're right. Everything you said is true. I was a coward. I was cruel. I let Marlene treat you like that, and I did nothing to stop her. But I can change." We can fix this. You can change? I asked softly. Michael, you're 32 years old. You're not a child. You're a grown man who deliberately chose to humiliate his own mother to impress his wife and his in-laws. That's not something you fix with an apology. Then what do you want? He asked, real desperation in his voice. Tell me what I have to do to fix this. I looked at my son, at this man I had raised with so much love, so much sacrifice. I saw the 5-year-old boy who cried in my arms after his father left us. I saw the proud teenager the day he got into college. I saw the nervous young man on his wedding day. And now I saw the man who had betrayed me in the deepest way possible. I don't know if you can fix this, I said honestly. I don't know if I want you to fix it. Marlene, recovering some of her composure, tried a different approach. Look, Helen, obviously there was a lack of communication. If you had just told us from the beginning that you had resources, none of this would have happened. Exactly, I said, pointing at her. None of this would have happened if you'd known I have money. But it did happen because you thought I didn't. And that tells you everything you need to know about yourself. Her face flushed. You can't just show up and… Show up? I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. This is my restaurant. Marlene, you are the one who showed up here. You are the one who sat at my table, ate my food, and used my establishment as a stage to humiliate me. And now you have the nerve to tell me I'm the one who's out of line? Julian stepped forward. Mrs. Helen, if I may suggest, perhaps it would be better to continue this conversation in your office. The customers are starting to get concerned. I looked around. He was right. Some customers looked uncomfortable, others fascinated. But this was a business, and business required a certain decorum, no matter how justified my outrage. You're right, Julian, I said. But there will be no conversation in my office. Everything that needed to be said has been said. I turned back to Michael. I'm going to tell you something, son, and I want you to listen closely, because it will probably be the last thing I say to you for a long time. The money I have, the businesses I built, the properties I own, I did it all thinking about your future, thinking about leaving you something when I'm gone, thinking about making sure your daughter, my granddaughter, would have opportunities. Michael was sobbing openly now. Mom. But tonight, you taught me something valuable, I continued. You taught me that giving money to someone who doesn't respect you isn't generosity, it's weakness. You taught me that the real legacy isn't what you leave in a bank account, but the values you instill. And clearly, I failed at that. You didn't fail, he said through his tears. I failed. I ruined everything. Yes, you did, I confirmed, and the words were like knives. But do you know what the worst part is, Michael? It's not that you treated me poorly tonight. It's that you probably would have kept doing it if you hadn't found out I have money. That's the part that hurts the most. Marlene tried to get closer. Helen, I understand you're angry, but let's be reasonable. We're family. We can get past this. Family, I repeated, looking at her coldly. Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't despise. Family doesn't leave you with a glass of water while everyone else eats in front of you. You don't know what family means, Marlene. And sadly, my son seems to have forgotten too. Marlene's father, who had remained relatively quiet, finally spoke in a tone that tried to be authoritarian. Look, ma'am, I understand you feel offended, but you're making an unnecessary scene. We are respectable people. We don't deserve to be publicly humiliated this way. I turned to him slowly, and something in my expression must have made him take a step back. Publicly humiliated, I repeated, and my voice was dangerously calm. Interesting choice of words. Tell me, what exactly did you all do to me half an hour ago? What would you call leaving someone without food at a family dinner? Telling her she needs to know her place? Implying she's too poor and embarrassing to be around her own family? He didn't answer. He just clenched his jaw and looked away. That's what I thought, I said. The humiliation only counts when it happens to you, right? When I suffer it, it's just setting necessary boundaries. Right. Marlene's mother touched her husband's arm. Honey, maybe we should go. This is clearly not going anywhere. Oh no, I said quickly. Not yet. Because there's something else I need to say, and you're all going to hear it. Julian was still by my side, his presence silent but comforting. Some of my staff had moved closer, forming a discreet semicircle behind me. They were people who knew me, who had worked with me for years, who knew who I really was. Their loyalty in this moment meant more than I could express. "Marlene," I said, looking her straight in the eye, "you said I couldn't offer anything of value to this family, that I had no resources, status, or connections. Let me correct you on that." She looked at me with a mix of fear and resentment. "I own 3 restaurants in this city," I continued. "This is the most exclusive, but the other 2 are also very successful. I own commercial properties in 2 different states. I have investments in tech, real estate, and international markets. My net worth is over $2 million, and I built it all with those mediocre jobs you despise so much." The silence was absolute. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the distant murmur from the kitchen, my own heart beating in my ears. "As for connections," I continued, "look around this restaurant. See that man in the corner booth? He's the mayor of this city. He dines here twice a month. The woman by the window? She's a Superior Court judge. The group at the large table are executives from the biggest corporation in the state. All of them know me. All of them respect me, not because I have money, but because I built something valuable, and I did it with integrity." Michael had slumped into a chair, his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "But do you know what's the most ironic part of all this, Marlene?" I said, leaning slightly toward her. "That promotion Michael is waiting for, the one your uncle is supposedly going to get for him? I could make one phone call and secure it in 5 minutes. The CEO of that company dines here every Friday. I've known him for 6 years. But I never did it, because I believed Michael should earn things for himself, just like I did." Marlene looked dizzy. She held onto the back of a chair for balance. "And as for status," I continued, addressing all of them now, "let me explain something to you about real status. It's not about how much money you have, or what clothes you wear, or what car you drive. It's about how you treat people when you think they can offer you nothing in return. It's about integrity, compassion, and respect. And by that measure, all of you are absolutely penniless." Marlene's mother let out a choked sound, as if she'd been slapped. "Tonight, you tested my character," I said, my voice softer now, but no less intense. "You humiliated me to see what I would do, if I would cry, if I would beg, if I would leave in silence. But what you didn't expect was this. You didn't expect me to have power, and now that you know I have it, you want to take it all back. You want to pretend nothing happened. You want us to be family again." I paused, letting my words sink in. "But family doesn't work that way," I continued. "You can't turn it on and off like a switch to suit your convenience. You can't mistreat someone and then expect everything to go back to normal when you find out that person has something you want." Michael lifted his head. "Mom, please, I'll do anything. Anything. Give me a chance to prove I can change." I looked at my son, this broken man in front of me, and I felt something complicated in my chest. Love mixed with disappointment, sadness mixed with rage, the maternal instinct that told me to forgive him, fighting against the woman who knew she deserved more. "Michael," I said gently, "the problem isn't whether you can change. The problem is that you shouldn't need a dramatic revelation to treat your own mother well. The problem is that your respect for me was dependent on what you thought I could or couldn't offer you." "I was blind," he said, sobbing. "Marlene had me blind, but that's no excuse. I should have been stronger. I should have defended you." Marlene took a step back, outraged. "Now, you're blaming me? You agreed with everything. You said those things too. Why do I follow you blindly in everything?" Michael shouted, turning on her for the first time with rage. "Because I always want to please you, to keep the peace, to avoid your tantrums. But look what it cost me. Look what I did by trying to make someone happy who doesn't even know what respect means." Marlene recoiled as if he'd hit her. "How dare you?" "How dare I?" he retorted, getting to his feet. "You organized this dinner. You insisted on inviting Mom. And now I know why. You wanted to humiliate her. You wanted to put her in her place, like you said. This was planned from the beginning." Marlene's face turned red. "I did not. That's not." "It's exactly that," I interrupted. "This was never a reconciliation dinner. It was an execution. A way to make it clear to me that I'm no longer welcome in your lives. That my place is outside, in the dark, where I can't embarrass you. Julian cleared his throat. Mrs. Helen, there are clients waiting for this table. Would you like me to escort them to the exit? Marlene glared at him. You can't kick us out. We were paying customers. Actually, Julian said with a cold smile, the check was processed half an hour ago. You are no longer customers. You are people who are disturbing the atmosphere of this establishment. And Mrs. Helen has every right to ask you to leave. Marlene's father puffed out his chest. This is ridiculous. We're going to sue for... For what? I asked, crossing my arms. For treating my staff well? For owning my own business? For defending myself from humiliation? I suggest you think very carefully before you threaten legal action. I have very good lawyers, and I have proof of every word you said tonight. This restaurant has security cameras in every corner, audio and video. That shut him up effectively. Marlene turned even paler, if that was possible. But don't worry, I continued. I have no intention of using that material against you, unless you force me to. Unless you try to slander me or cause me problems, then yes, those recordings will become very public. And let me tell you, social media is not kind to people who humiliate elderly mothers in public. You're not elderly, Michael muttered miserably. To them I replied, motioning to Marlene's parents. To them, I was the poor old lady who didn't even deserve a plate of food. Marlene's mother finally found her voice, though it was shaky. We never wanted it to go this far. We thought we were protecting our daughter, our grandchild. Protecting them from what? I asked. From a grandmother who loves them? From a woman who only wanted to be part of their lives? You weren't protecting anyone. You were feeding your own sense of superiority. Marlene, seeing that all was lost, tried one last approach. Her voice became soft, almost pleading. Helen, I know things got out of control tonight, but think about Chloe. Think about your granddaughter. Do you really want to keep her away from you because of this? It was the wrong move. Do I want to keep her away from me? I repeated, and my voice was dangerously low. Marlene, you were the one who said Chloe needed to spend time with people who could add value. That I wasn't good enough for her. That my experiences weren't enriching. I'm not the one who pushed her away. You are. Marlene opened her mouth to protest, but I continued before she could speak. And now that you know I have money, now that you know I have connections and resources, suddenly you want me to think about my granddaughter. Suddenly I'm good enough to be in her life. But it doesn't work that way. My relationship with Chloe is not a commodity you can negotiate based on your convenience. She loves you, Michael said desperately. She asks about you all the time. She makes drawings for you. She misses you. I felt a pang in my heart. Chloe, my sweet 4-year-old granddaughter with her dark curls and her infectious laugh. The girl who called me Grandma Helen and would fall asleep in my arms while I read her stories. Walking away from her would be like ripping my own heart out. But staying, allowing this to continue, would be teaching her that abuse is okay. That unconditional love means accepting humiliation, and that was a lesson I refused to give her. I miss her too, I admitted, and my voice broke slightly. I miss her every day, but I will not allow her to grow up in an environment where it's taught that it's okay to mistreat people based on their apparent social status. I will not let her learn from her mother that cruelty is acceptable if the victim seems defenseless. Please, Michael begged, moving closer to me. Don't punish all of us for my mistakes. Chloe is innocent in all of this. I know, I said softly, and that's precisely why I can't allow her to be exposed to this kind of behavior any longer. If you want me to be a part of her life again, you are going to have to prove to me that you have changed. And I don't mean changed because you now know I have money. I mean a real, profound change in how you treat people. Julian discreetly cleared his throat. Mrs. Helen, we really need to clear this area. There's a 10 o'clock reservation, and it's almost 5 minutes to 10. I nodded, grateful for the interruption. This conversation was draining every ounce of energy I had left. You're right, I said, looking at each of them. It's time for you to go. All of you. And then what? Michael asked, his voice broken. You just erase us from your life? After everything? No, I replied. You erased me from yours tonight. I'm just respecting your decision. But we said terrible things because we didn't know, Marlene insisted, panic in her voice now. If we had known the truth, that is exactly the problem, I interrupted. That your behavior depends on what you think someone can offer you. That's not respect. That's opportunism. Marlene's father stepped forward, trying to regain some dignity. Look, obviously we all made mistakes tonight, but we're reasonable people. We can reach an agreement. An agreement? I repeated, almost laughing at the audacity. What kind of agreement are you proposing? We pretend nothing happened in exchange for… What? Access to my money? My connections? My resources? That's not it, he said quickly, though his expression betrayed him. It was exactly that. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, I announced, straightening up and looking at all of them. I'm going to give you time. Time to think about what you did. Time to reflect on what kind of people you want to be. And time to decide if you truly value people for who they are, or only for what you can get from them. How much time? Michael asked anxiously. As long as it takes, I answered. It could be a month. It could be 6 months. It could be never. It's entirely up to you. Marlene let out a sound of frustration. That's not fair. You can't just leave us hanging like this. Not fair? I repeated, my voice rising slightly. You know what's not fair, Marlene? It's not fair to invite someone to dinner and deny them food. It's not fair to deliberately humiliate your mother-in-law in front of your family. It's not fair to tell a grandmother she isn't good enough for her own granddaughter. That is what's not fair. She shrank back at my tone, speechless for the first time all night. Now, I said, gesturing toward the exit, it's time for you to go. Julian will escort you to the door. Julian stepped forward, professional but firm. This way, please. Michael made one last attempt. Mom, please. I love you. I've always loved you. I made a terrible, unforgivable mistake, but you have to believe me when I say I'm sorry. I looked at him, this man who had been my entire world for more than 3 decades. I saw the tears in his eyes, the desperation on his face, and part of me, that maternal part that never dies, wanted to comfort him, wanted to hold him and tell him everything would be okay. But another part of me, the part that had been trampled on tonight, the part that deserved dignity and respect, held firm. Love without respect isn't love, I said finally. It's dependence. It's manipulation. It's convenience. And I have spent my whole life confusing one for the other. But tonight, you taught me the difference. I can learn, he insisted. I can be better. Give me a chance. I already gave you every chance in the world, I replied. I gave you my youth. I gave you my money. I gave you my time. I gave you my unconditional love. And you chose to use me as a stepping stone and then kick me away when you thought you didn't need me anymore. The words were harsh, but they were true, and they needed to be said. Marlene's mother grabbed her daughter's arm. Let's go, dear. We've caused enough of a scandal for one night. But Mom said we can fix this, Marlene protested weakly. Not tonight, her mother said, pulling her toward the exit. Definitely not tonight. Marlene's father followed his wife and daughter, but not before shooting me a look that mixed resentment with something like reluctant respect. Michael was the last to move, dragging his feet like a punished child. He stopped at the entrance and turned back to me one last time. Can I at least call you? Send messages? Anything? I considered the question. Part of me wanted to say yes, to keep that line of communication open, but I knew if I did, we'd fall right back into the same patterns. He would apologize, I would forgive, and nothing would really change. When you're ready to have a real conversation, I said, when you're ready to make real changes and not just say what you think I want to hear, then you can contact me. But not before. How will I know when I'm ready? He asked. You'll know, I replied simply. When you can look at what happened tonight and fully understand, without excuses or justifications, the depth of the damage you caused, when you can recognize that the problem wasn't that you didn't know I had money, but that you believed it was acceptable to treat me that way in the first place, when you get to that point of understanding, then you'll be ready. He nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. I love you, Mom. I love you too, I admitted, and it was true. That's why this hurts so much. That's why I need this to mean something. That's why I can't just forgive and forget as if nothing happened. Julian gently touched Michael's shoulder. Sir, please, I need to ask you to leave now. Michael nodded, wiping his tears on the back of his hand. He walked toward the door, his shoulders slumped, defeated. I watched them all leave, one by one, until they disappeared into the night. The restaurant was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, as if someone had pressed play after a pause, the conversations resumed. Silverware clinked against plates. Life went on. Julian walked over to me, his expression concerned. Mrs. Helen, are you all right? Do you need to sit down? A glass of water? Though I suppose you've had enough water for one night. In spite of everything, I let out a laugh. A small, tired, but genuine laugh. I'm fine, Julian, I said, touching his arm gratefully. Or at least I will be, eventually. He nodded with understanding. What you did tonight was brave. Difficult, but brave. And if I may say so, absolutely necessary. Do you think I was too harsh? I asked, surprising myself with the question. After everything that had happened, part of me was still looking for validation, still questioning if I had done the right thing. Julian shook his head firmly. Mrs. Helen, I've worked for you for 10 years. I've watched you build this empire from scratch. I've seen you treat every employee with dignity, pay fair wages when you could have paid less, give chances to people other businesses would turn away. You are one of the most generous and kind-hearted people I know. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I've also seen you sacrifice too much. Work double shifts so you could send money to your son. Deny yourself pay raises to keep prices affordable. Live modestly while building wealth you never enjoyed. And I always wondered why. Tonight, I finally understood. You were testing something. And, sadly, you got your answer. His words resonated with me because they were true. All the truth I hadn't dared to admit even to myself. I wasn't harsh, I continued for him. I was fair. There's a difference. Exactly, Julian agreed. And if I may offer some personal advice, I think you need to go home, have a glass of wine and rest. Tonight was intense. I looked around the restaurant. The tables were full again. The murmur of conversations had returned to its normal rhythm. It was as if the last 30 minutes had been a parenthesis in reality, a suspended moment that was now over. But for me, nothing would ever be the same. You're right, I said finally. I'm going home. You'll handle closing tonight. Of course, ma'am, as always. I walked to my office in the back of the restaurant, a small but cozy space with an old desk, shelves full of cookbooks and recipes, and photos on the walls. Photos of the restaurant opening, of special events, of my team. And yes, there were some of Michael, too. Michael graduating from college. Michael at his wedding. Michael holding a newborn Chloe. I picked up one of the photographs, the one from his graduation. His smile was huge, proud. I was beside him, smiling too, my hands on his shoulders. We looked happy. We looked like a real family. I wondered when exactly it had all broken. Was it gradual? Were there signs I ignored? Or was it sudden? A change I didn't see coming. Probably a little of both. I placed the photo back in its spot and grabbed my purse. I turned off the office lights and walked out the back door, the one that led to the private parking lot where I kept my car. It was nothing flashy, just a reliable 5-year-old sedan. Another example of my choice to live modestly despite having the means to do otherwise. The cold night air hit my face. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs, cleansing me somehow. The sky was clear, full of stars that glittered like tiny reminders that the world was bigger than my pain. I drove home in silence, no music, no radio, just me and my thoughts. I thought about Michael when he was little, how he used to hug me and tell me that when he grew up, he'd buy me a big house. I thought about all the times I sacrificed my own needs for his. I thought about the years of hard work, the sleepless nights, the skipped meals so he could eat. And I thought about how, despite all of that, I had ended up sitting in my own restaurant, watching him eat lobster while he gave me only water. I arrived at my apartment, the same small but comfortable apartment where I had lived for 15 years. 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, a living room with old but comfortable furniture. Marlene had asked why I lived like this if I had so much money. The answer was simple. This place was mine. I had earned it. And I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the sofa, and finally let the tears come. I cried for the relationship I had lost. I cried for my granddaughter, who I probably wouldn't see for a long time. I cried for the mother I had been, so dedicated that I had forgotten to teach my son the most important lesson, that a person's worth isn't measured in dollars. But I also cried with relief, because after years of carrying the weight of being invisible, of being taken for granted, I had finally stood up for myself. I had finally said, no more. My phone vibrated. A text message from Michael. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Asterisk, Mom, I know you asked for space, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Not for your money, not for your restaurants, but for forgetting who you were to me, for forgetting everything you did, for letting you sit there with no food while I ate as if you didn't matter. I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to be better. And someday, I hope I can prove it to you. I love you. Asterisk. I read the message 3 times. The words sounded sincere, but words always sound sincere in the heat of the moment, after being caught. True change would be shown with time, with actions, not with panicked text messages. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened my photo gallery and looked for pictures of Chloe, my sweet granddaughter smiling in her yellow dress at her last birthday. Holding the grocery store cake, I had brought her the one that had apparently caused such embarrassment. But in the photo, she looked radiant, happy, loved. That was what mattered. Not the price of the cake, not the brand of the dress, but the love behind the gesture. And if there was one thing tonight had taught me, it was this. Love without respect isn't enough. Sacrifice without recognition isn't noble. It's self-destructive. And teaching people to walk all over you doesn't make them better. It only makes you smaller. I leaned back on the sofa, holding my cup of tea, and stared at the ceiling. I thought about the future. What would I do now? What would life be like without that toxic family dynamic consuming my energy? And for the first time in years, I felt something like hope. Maybe I would use more of my money on myself. That trip to Italy I had always wanted to take. Those painting classes I was interested in. Maybe I'd renovate this apartment, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I deserved it. Maybe I'd invest more in my other restaurants, expand the business. Maybe I'd start a foundation to help single mothers who were struggling, just like I had. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like my life belonged to me again. My phone vibrated again. Another message, but this time from an unknown number. I opened it curiously. Asterisk Mrs. Helen, this is Martin Reyes from the restaurant tonight, table 18. I witnessed what happened with your family. I just wanted to say that what you did was extraordinary. The respect you showed for yourself, the dignity with which you handled the situation, was inspiring. My wife and I are regular customers, but after tonight, we are admirers. Thank you for reminding us that standing up for yourself isn't cruelty, it's self-love. Asterisk. I read the message twice, feeling something warm expand in my chest. A stranger, someone who owed me nothing, had taken the time to find my number and send me words of encouragement. I replied briefly, "Thank you. Your words mean more than you can imagine." And it was true. Because in the midst of all the pain, all the confusion, all the loss, that one small message reminded me of something important. I had done the right thing. I finished my tea and went to my room. I changed into comfortable clothes, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 64-year-old woman, a woman with hard-earned wrinkles, with tired but still bright eyes, with gray hair I had stopped dyeing years ago. I saw a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had built empires while others underestimated her, a woman who had finally learned that her worth didn't depend on anyone else's validation. "You know your place," I said to my reflection, remembering Michael's cruel words. "And your place is wherever you decide it is." I got into bed, turned off the light, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be another day. There would be decisions to make, paths to choose, wounds to heal. But for tonight, I had done enough. I had defended my dignity. I had reclaimed my power. I had shown that some people learn to know their own place while others learn to own theirs. And I, finally, after a lifetime of sacrifice and silence, was the owner of mine.